a lot of the funding comes from places like the Rockefeller Foundation.
So when did that start then, Neil?
Well, this essentially started in 1921, so it predates MKUl, and it probably predates Korean and Chinese mind control techniques. In 1932, Kurt Lewin took over as directorship, and he was a German psychiatrist who was later taken back to America to start the OSS, which was the precursor for the CIA. So we can see that basically a lot of these organisations appear to be very, very interwoven.
And some people refer to the Tavistock Institute as a secret society.
Well, it's certainly got elements of secret societies in it. I mean, it refers to its psychologist as an invisible college, which basically harks back to sort of, you know, mystery religions and such like that. And also, its principal sort of raison d'etre is to reduce society back to a blank state. What it says is that by introducing terror on a widespread basis in society, it basically reverts to a tabula rasa or a blank state where exterior control can be put onto the population. That, to me, sounds remarkably similar to order out of chaos, which you probably know is Freemasonic.
So you see, would you describe the people who run the Tavistock Institute as like academic elites? Is that
Yeah, no,
and
absolutely.
they thought that they should basically be controlling the plebs.
For the benefit of society.
Need to be, you know, dumbed down and made sure that they're basically controlled.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
so would you say that the Tavistock Institute had kind of a superiority, felt that they were superior to ordinary people? Then?
Absolutely, absolutely. This is entirely what it's about. It's about entraining people in authority, training world leaders.
So they were involved in actually training up-and-coming leaders in psychological techniques
Absolutely,
as well.
and applying psychological techniques to society. I mean, essentially, it is using fear to shock people into submission and desensitize them and destabilize them. I mean, Eric Trist, who was the chairman of the Tavistock Institute in 1963, described their work as creating social turbulence. Basically, he said that this will desensitize and destabilize a society. It will lower its ability to critically analyze, and it will mean that basically anybody or whoever should wish to could impose their worldview on the society. He said in 1963 that the world was already, he proudly stated that thanks to Tavistock, the world was already in a state of permanent social turbulence.
Right, and you contend that they deliberately keep it like that in order to best control the people.
Absolutely. I mean, if you're fearful all the time, if you're on edge, you react. I mean, even from a psychological process, you get into that fight or flight sort of area, and so you don't have the chance to rationally go over things and critically analyse and deal with things. Basically, if you're terrified, you'll take any help and any advice that will be given, and you know the people that are often giving the advice are people in authority who possibly don't have your best interests at heart. And
we were discussing earlier the Cold War. You know, the communist threat, which went away in the early 90s, and now we've got the Arab threat.
Yeah.
And you think they're orchestrated purely for the same reason, to increase fear, so people are controlled? Or?
I think it's sort of broad stereotypes. You know, it's easily understandable enemies, people that basically anybody can say, yes, this is something that I can understand. I think that is very, very, very sort of important to them. You can't be questioning yourself. You've got to have yourself as the sort of defined norm, and anyone else defined as an other which can be looked upon with cynicism, essentially. You know, to be treated with suspicion.
All right then. Well, let's come on to psychotronics.
Okay.
Now, that's quite a long word. Can you explain what that means?
Well, psychotronics is essentially electronic means of hypnotising. You know, we've got George Esterbrook's using hypnotism, we've got Ewan Cameron using psychic driving, we've got people in Tavistock like William Sargent who are basically using exactly the same techniques as Ewan Cameron at the same time.
So you're saying using electronics?
But well, these are sort of these are the previous methods.
Right.
Basically, in the 60s, the CIA seemed to move away from drugs into psychotronics, electronic means, and things like synthetic telepathy, you know, putting emotional states into people's heads, making people feel things, making people see and hear things that aren't there, using electronic means, using subaural devices, electromagnetic waves.
Right. So when you say using electronic devices, let's just drill down into that.
A physical device, like essentially like a ray gun or something like that one could shoot at somebody.
And that would be a microwave?
It could be a microwave, it could be ELF, it could be...
Extra low frequency radio waves?
Yeah, I mean...
So different types of electromagnetic waves, basically. Yeah. But what about implants?
Well, obviously implants are there as well. I mean, there's a broad range. You've got people like Michael Persinger and Igor Smirnov, and they are dealing with subliminal and subaural, sort of putting emotions into people's heads. If you see a puppy being kicked, say, like basically you're taking that stimuli and your brain will interpret that into electronic signals and you will feel emotion.
Yes.
And what they did essentially was bypass that visual stimuli.
Right.
They're making your brain respond to something, and then you get the physical emotive response. As far as implants go, the person who really was into implants was Jose Delgado. Now, a lot of people will have seen Jose Delgado and not realised it. It's the experiment where he had a bull in a bull ring, and by remote control means he stopped it charging at him mid-charge.
Right.
Jose Delgado basically felt that human free will was bad for democracy.
So you had an implant in the bull's head?
Yeah, these are called stymosevers, and basically what these do, they will go directly into the brain, and they can be controlled by remote, controlled by computer mechanisms.
And would that device be preventing the bull's muscles from working, or would it be inducing fear, or why would the bull stop in that case?
I have a quote here. Basically, Delgado stated, it's already possible to induce a large variety of responses from motor effects to emotional responses and intellectual manifestations by direct electrical stimulation. The individual is defenseless against direct manipulation of the brain because it is derived in his most intimate mechanisms of biological reactivity. Electrical stimulation of appropriate intensity always prevails over free will. For example, stimulation of the motor cortex will cause flexion of the hand that cannot voluntarily be avoided. Destruction of the frontal lobes produces changes in effectiveness which are beyond personal control.
Right.
I mean, he had some very strange ideas. He felt that perhaps organised slave societies were happier than normal, modern day societies because they took away that agony of decision, which was good of him.
Really, yeah. It's amazing. I mean, but would you not need a whole load of implants if you wanted to create all of these different effects? I mean,
well,
you know what I mean? Because
these different electrical signals. I suppose so, but I mean, I really wouldn't know. I mean, there's many people that have been found with these implants in them. I mean, Robert Naisland is one particular researcher. I believe he's in Switzerland or Sweden, I forget. But he's had it independently verified that he's got lots of foreign objects in his brain.
You would say they were put there by the CIA?
I think they were actually put there by his own country's secret police.
Now, what year are we talking about with this bull experiment and the quote that you came out with there?
That was 1965. So obviously, the technology's gone on a little bit by there. But still, this is years ago, and this is what they're telling the public.
Yeah.
If you can just imagine what they're not telling the public, and they've got 50 years on us, it's incredible.
And so, okay. An electronic device inside your brain, that would be controlled remotely then? Or
yes, remotely. But I mean,
was this guy, did he have wires attached? Or
No, not at all. This can be controlled through sort of electromagnetic waves.
Right.
So much in the same way I assume that satellite television can be picked up. It's a receiver and a transmitter, and
like your remote control for TV.
Exactly, and it can be affected like that.
Right.
But you may not even need that. I mean, Lieutenant Commander Thomas Nora was addressing a Navy psychological NATO conference on dimensions of stress and anxiety in Norway, and he accidentally let slip to the journalists there that basically the Navy had been involved in creating mind-controlled assassins using Ludovico technique, which is like in Clockwork Orange, where he's got his eyes held open, and he said it took about 4 to 6 weeks. They could completely change this person's character, make them a completely cold psychological killer, a robotic killer. When people suggested that perhaps he was speaking out of turn, or it wasn't really, it was confirmed by another psychiatrist called Dr. Erwin Sorensen. and he confirmed that basically the Navy had approached him and he'd carried out these experimentations many times.
So let's say the person doesn't have an implant and they want to use psychotronics using microwave, and it's normally ELF, extra low frequency. Then how can those waves affect the brain's emotions or behaviour or what have you, if it's just a radio wave effectively?
Well, I mean, if you think about the brain, it's essentially, the human body is essentially electrons, electrical synapses going off and such like that. These physiological responses that cause emotional responses. If we can get in the way of that and we can cause those electrical or synaptic responses to happen, we can create the same physiological responses in people.
Now, I mean, if you just consider humans, we are, I heard Barry Trower saying this, who's an expert on microwave technology, and we're essentially water, or 75% water, and we know what a microwave oven does to a glass of water.
Yes.
So microwaves are, I think in a microwave oven you're talking about sort of 4 or 5 inches in terms of their wavelength.
Yeah.
And it's these wavelengths that affect the human body the most.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And there's recorded instances of it happening, and not just in the past. Like there's a researcher called Tim Reifer, and he strongly believes and shows incredible evidence that somebody, possibly MI5, possibly the police, is using electromagnetic waves and microwaves to disperse vagrants in Brighton. In Brighton, in February 2010, he recorded a white van, a mysterious white van, shooting waves of electromagnetism and microwave energy at people collecting in areas, making them ill, making them disperse, and often basically directed at people leaving the police station as well.
Now, have we not had that at Greenham Common?
Absolutely, we had it at Greenham Common. And again, it's not officially admitted to, but basically they had a system of security in there that it was electromagnetic wave patterns and such like that. People were becoming ill at the same time. People were having circulatory problems.
Might that not be an audio type of weapon?
Absolutely, it could well be. But
But you would say that they've got microwave crowd dispersal type technology? Yes,
because basically a lot of the people were coming up with symptoms that were completely... In medical books, if you looked at radiation poisoning, this is what people were getting. They were getting bleeding out of their eyes, they were getting headaches. A lot of people later developed cancers and sadly died.
Yes, because, I mean, this is, I believe, one of the side effects of microwaves, that it can cause cancer.
Well, it's known that it can, because in 1953, the Russians were bombarding the US embassy in Moscow with microwave energy. The American government actually knew about this, but they didn't let the employees know about this. And I believe it was Ambassador Stossel developed lymphoma, bleeding eyes, and eventually died. Now, what happened was, rather than sort of stop this, the Americans used it to conduct their own experiments, see what would happen to people, and then they continued this experimentation back in America under Dr. Ross Addy, for one.
And there's a possible incident in one of the Iraq wars.
Yes, this has been talked about in a number of areas. Essentially, it's been questioned, why did all these heavily sort of fortified and dug-in Iraqi Republican Guard all en masse surrender? What happened, according to the theory, is that a helicopter went over transmitting suboral or ELF or microwave, nobody quite knows, subliminal messages, and this caused the en masse dissolution of forces. They surrendered, and they were very happy about it. If you look at, there was some footage of them basically running towards their captors as if, they're their parents. They really sort of go for it.
Now, it's incredible how that can be used, and I don't think it's from what I've read, it's down to the intensity necessarily of the beam. It can be done with quite a weak beam. It's the actual possible frequency or the resonance or what have you. Do you have any information on that?
Well, I wouldn't like to say. Do you know? I mean, there's different methods. And
you see, you quoted ELF, extra low frequency radio waves, and microwaves. They're completely different in different areas of the spectrum. Microwaves are much faster frequency than an ELF wave. So they affect the brain slightly differently, but they both affect the brain. Is that what you...
Well, under MKUl, there was at least 149 separate projects, okay, and they range from truth serums to various different types of mind control, including one called perfect concussion, which basically is a ray that can wipe somebody's mind at a distance of hundreds of meters.
Right.
So there are numerous ways, essentially, and they've spent thousands and thousands of pounds researching it.
So how could people protect themselves if they're being mind controlled remotely from someone in the next building, let's say?
Well, Jim Keith, who's an excellent researcher, sadly now dead, he claimed that the Tenderloin area of San Francisco was under constant either ELF or microwave bombardment, and when it was, and when the intensity peaked, the amount of fights and rapes and violent crimes would suddenly rocket up by 5%, which is noticeable enough to carry out experiments, but not noticeable enough for people to say, hey, what's going on? Now, he found that he managed to stop this buzzing by wrapping his head in tinfoil, which I assume is where we get the tinfoil hat wearing conspiracy nut idea.
Yeah. I think I have heard Barry Trower again, he's an ex-British intelligence officer, and he researched microwaves. That was his job. And he said that you erect like an aluminium, it's aluminium as you say.
Like a Faraday cage almost,
but he claimed that it needed to be thicker than a piece of foil. It would need to be a few mil thick. You put that against your bedroom window when you go to bed at night to stop yourself being mind controlled.
Yeah, well, it's possible, but who knows what techniques they've got anyway. So
all right then, Neil, well, we're going to talk some more after this short break, so don't go away.